Tune into the context with CSI Peter.
On You Learn Naturally Radio.
Language and the use of words is extremely sensitive when it comes to the issue of racism. Mm-hmm. See, a lot of black people, they get emotional, but racism, as far as I understand, is like the core. It's like the sacred. It's a sacred. It's their juice. You can't mess around with their juice. Do you understand? We discuss it. You can't put emotional when you're dealing with that subject. It's too highly charged.
Tune into the context with CSI Peter. Tune into the context with CSI Peter.
On You Learn Naturally Radio. On You Learn Naturally Radio.
Tune into the context with CSI Peter.
See the contrast. The contrast. Yes.
You have opened our interview very perfectly. When I met you at Trafalgar Square, you had your full attire and you looked like a security person, and you are now identifying that we are on a crime scene.
Right. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just repeat that, please. Let me hear that again.
Okay.
That's a very interesting reasoning.
Yeah. Well, how I see you, basically based on my first experiences of meeting you. And now seeing you again today, it's you have the spirit of determination, like an investigator in a crime scene who's trying to get to the truth to find out what has taken place. And that's my attitude, because I see the world as a crime scene, and that crime scene is white supremacy.
Wow.
Whilst in contrast, because I've had lots of media people approach me. I used to go to Speaker's Corner.
Okay.
And they have that same kind of determination. But the vibe I pick up off them is that they're desperately seeking information in order to prop up what they've already established. Right. Whilst the feeling I get from you is that you're trying to get into the information, try and understand what crime has been committed. So one you can have a media person who is seeking information to try and hide the crime that they know about.
Oh.
Do you see the difference?
Yes, it's very true.
And there's other media.
Propaganda.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. So in a strange way, propaganda. Those who are creating propaganda, they need food. They need news, they need information in order to feed and maintain the propaganda. Whilst in contrast, you have others that are trying to decipher and get to the truth and unravel the propaganda that has been placed on them. So that's the two kind of views I see of media.
Well, that's a wonderful way. We're now on You Learn Naturally Radio, and you're right, we did meet at the African Remembrance Day, Slavery Remembrance Day in Trafalgar Square. And at that time you showed me a number of police cards representing codes that I used, and that we couldn't speak properly then, but we did say we would meet. Now we've met. We're at Dalian's book launch, one of his book launch events for Ancestral Calling, and I'm very keen, firstly, to ask you to introduce yourself, if you will, and to find out how you found this event.
Okay. I'll introduce myself as Peter Murray, and I found this event on Facebook. I'm looking for events that will be interesting to go to throughout the Black History Month. That's it, really. Facebook was the main source.
And so how have you found it in terms of your experience of the actual presentation and your engagement in it and others' engagements it seemed like quite a fluid conversation, and you had some very interesting points that you were making.
Yeah, well, I never heard of this brother before,
Okay.
But I heard that Robin Walker did his foreword.
Right.
So I know Robin Walker very well.
Okay.
So I thought, well, if Robin Walker endorsed his book, it's going to be interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Only for me, because I know Robin Walker.
Right.
So that's what I thought, yeah, this would be a good meeting to come along and let's hear what he's got to say.
As Robin Walker, the historian.
That's right, bro. Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm here.
Okay, so what have you... you came in with... And you've now explained how you came here.
Yes.
How are you leaving?
Okay. I found the presentation very good and excellent. It's very timely. In that, the impression I got is that the brother's written a book exploring African spirituality in its holistic sense. So, what is common between all aspects of African spirituality from the Caribbean, from the Africa, from the diaspora, and that he's making an effort to try and unite all the traditions that have survived all the abuse that's taken place over such a large period of time. Well, that's relative, whether it's a large period of time or not. And what I wanted to know is what was the name. I feel that there should be a name for this African spirituality, and I feel that there has to be a name, maybe a new name. Maybe he has to create a name, or maybe a group of people get together and create a name. But African spirituality is not powerful enough.
Why?
Because
when you say that, you mean the term African.
That's right. Because often when talking about African spirituality, people start putting in different words in trying to explain it. Like they use the word God, and they don't really understand the meaning of the word God. I mean, its roots in that God, the word God, G-O-D, has the same root as G-O-O-D, good, has the same root as Goth, G-O-T-H, which is Gothic. So whenever I hear somebody mention that word, because I've researched the roots of the word,
yes, it
just conjures up the energy of Northern European cultural values.
I hear you.
Their ancestral values. Gothic, Goth. You see, that's their word
I hear you.
for their essence. So it's a very powerful word. You know, people are singing it every Sunday, all the way through the week. They're singing God. There's always people using that word. So somehow that there has to be something for African spirituality. There has to be maybe a new form or a new word that has to capture what it is.
Obviously, you see the challenge of doing that.
Of course, it's a challenge. Of course,
he is working as essentially a Pan-Africanist.
Yes,
he's trying to look across Africa.
Yes.
To see all the spiritual traditions.
Yes.
And highlight the essence of them that come together.
Yes.
These are the fundamental values.
Yes,
of
that's right.
all.
Yes, which is an excellent word.
So as soon as you say name it, then the question to me would be, well, what language would you name it in?
There you go.
As soon as you name it in one language, then
yes.
you've aligned to a culture, and so then all other cultures may feel disaffected from that.
Exactly.
So why would you ask that question then? If you know this.
Right, because that very difficulty is the source of the power. That's the essence. The mere fact that it's so difficult means that if you can solve it, what you have is something very powerful. Does that make sense? The mere fact that it's so difficult to get to, if you get it, you got it.
I hear you.
That's why.
I hear you. Would you be happy with a word that was... I mean, what would you see as the root of these traditions?
Wow, that's the whole thing, you know. The roots of African spirituality, which is what I think his book is trying to get to, would have a name. And if that name cannot be found, a new name or a new sound will have to. So let's say.
Why would it have a name? Why is it not?
Let's see.
To be beyond naming.
Okay, so let's say if we look at a tree. So a tree, going upwards from the ground, it has branches spread out, and then going downwards from the ground, as branches spreading out. So at some point, that seed was at ground level, and then it grew into a tree. So it's moving both up and down at the same time.
Okay.
Right. So when one says we've got to get to the root of African spirituality, we're really trying to get back to that seed.
Okay.
And what was the name of that seed? And what was that seed?
See, the thing I'm trying to get to is, it's one thing to get back to the seed. It's another thing to get back to the seed and name it.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's possibly two different things.
Okay, I can accept that. That sounds good. That sounds good. So, can you get back to the seed without knowing its name? That's the question in my mind.
My humble experience of the things Brother was speaking about, in many of the traditions, the creator is recognized with a great deal of a beyondness, beyond the omniness in many aspects.
Okay.
So, in that sense, most of our traditions have already said, really, this is beyond the name.
Right.
Within their own individual relationship to the creator.
Right.
They said, it's beyond.
Okay.
And this is common across the ground.
Right.
Pan-Africa.
Okay.
So, if that be the case, then why do we need one name when we're trying to talk about the whole thing? Right.
Good point. So, which goes back to another point. If the African condition, as it is now, is not what it should be, then I think we all agree that there's some power. We have to find some way of getting power to change the situation we now are currently in. So we need to find out where that power is going to come from, what's going to be the source of that power, and if that power, we can't find a name for it, then how can we call upon it or use it to, or it use us to change the current situation for African people? Does that make sense?
Let's say it makes a kind of sense. Let's say you were in a desert and you met someone in the desert. You want water in the desert. You are thirsty and you meet someone in the desert. They have dug a hole, and in that hole there's some water.
Yes.
Right. And the tool they have a tool, and they use this tool to dig the ground and find this water.
Yes.
Right. Do you need to know the name of the tool in order to take it and dig the ground and find water?
You don't need to know the name of the tool, but you need to be able to communicate effectively with the person who is using it to extract water. Because if you want the tool, do you want the person to give you the water that they've extracted, or do you want the tool? And if you want the tool, are you going to fight the person for the tool? You're going to kill the person to get the tool so you can drink from the water? You know what?
Okay, I hear you.
Do you hear?
I hear you. In my relationship to language, I have a relationship to language which I consider a unified knowledge language approach, which involves sign as part of a natural approach to language.
Sign, so that's right.
In that situation, someone could sign non-verbally
yes.
their desire to have the tool to get some water, to dig the ground with the tool, to use the tool to dig the ground to get some water,
yes.
without any word, in terms of a verbal word.
I accept
right.
that, yes.
So,
yes.
in that sense now, the word is non-verbal.
Right.
But you seem to be wanting a verbal word. Is that right? Or can it be a non-verbal word? Can it be a non-verbal expression that is the thing you're looking for?
I think to maximize power, you're going to need a word. That's a clash that we have here. You're going to need a word. I appreciate and accept that non-verbal communication is a value, but to maximize power, I think you're going to need a word.
Okay, I'm gonna, because there's other things I want to ask you, so I'm gonna leave it at that point. And
okay.
We're hanging on basically what is a word.
That's right.
That's what we're hanging on.
The value of a word. The value of word.
Okay,
that's right.
Because I think this is a wonderful thing for the listeners of You Learn Naturally Radio to ponder on.
Right.
Okay, you brought in a reasoning about current and bank, and I thought this was a very lovely thing. The way you spoke about current and bank.
Right.
Can you just speak to that again?
Yes. See, I mentioned, I was listening and there was some discussion about justice. And the brother who wrote the book said, there's no concept of justice. It has no value. While the other brother was saying justice should be done. So that word justice, a lot of people say, well, we want justice. But nobody knows what justice is. And so I was doing some research into that word justice, and what I found is that it comes from the Latin of jus, which is J-U-S, or sometimes I-U-S. And so if you look up your listeners can look up the look up the Latin for J-U-S, juice.
The root word for justice.
Yes,
right,
and once you read through that, but I won't go through the words. There's so many words there, but you start to see more or less what this justice is, and justice. It also mentions it's a soup, and it's juice, and then so this juice or justice is really a soup. Justice is a flow of energy, of liquid force, which could, as you know, the human being is made up mostly water. So so justice is described more like a flow of a river, and the flow of a river is a current. So all these words come into just and justice. So justice, having read all the descriptions of that word in Latin, the picture I get is of a river, of a soup, of a river flowing that has minerals and value. And as the river flows, it's guided by the bank. So it's related to current and currency. So the banking is about the guidance of the flow of the juice of the current. So when people say, "Oh, he's a big soup," I used to hear that term many years ago. It didn't mean anything to me. When I started to research the juice, then I started, that's what it is. The big soup means he's able to get the flow of the current of the public opinion. See, it's all a flow, it's all a current. See, and which relates back to the bank, the river bank. As a trader, the decisions you're making are either moving the flow or influencing the flow, and the flow is influencing you. So there's a relationship between the bank and the river. There's the same relationship between the money and currency, between the person who pushes an idea and the listeners, between the pastor and the congregation of a church. It's just the flow of intent.
I think
it's hard to explain.
No, you've done a wonderful thing in bringing that analogy and metaphor. I've heard ones say we should replace racism with justice. Now, this idea, replace racism with justice.
I've heard that too.
Right.
Yes.
So, can you fit that into what you're talking about?
Right. Well, that's an interesting question.
What does that mean in terms of
I never thought of it, but now I'm going to think of it. I'm going to think from the hip now and shoot from the hip.
Yeah.
Replace racism with justice. Actually, it doesn't make sense then, because racism itself is a juice.
Okay.
Do you understand?
No, I don't understand. But
yes.
you can explain it to me.
Yeah. So
I'd like to understand. But tell me, what is racism then? Let's just define the term.
Right. So racism is a belief system. It's a belief system. So that's why I relate it to juice, because they're a group of people, maybe as a society, and they have that intent. They have that juice. They intend to maintain that flow. So the currency of racism is a flow of a river that brings nourishment to their fields, to their bank, to their farm. It's for them. So once you go against racism, you are trying to go against the current. I mean, not go against the current. You're trying to redirect the current.
That current.
Yes. And if you try to redirect that current, you're taking away from the irrigation of their crops. Do you understand? So it's like a farm. It's like irrigation. It's like watering crops.
This sounds a lot like an Anansi story. I'm sure I've heard an Anansi story. There's a creation story. And, one farmer's land gets all the rain, and anyway.
That's interesting.
And Anansi has a little play inside of that. What he does, what he thinks he has to do to get the rain onto his farm.
Okay.
Which, anyway, I won't spoil the story for ones, but. Continue.
Yes. So racism. Having thought about it, what you just said, just thinking on the moment, you can't really replace racism with justice, because racism is justice, but it's not. It's a justice for a certain group of people. It's juice. It's justice. It's juice. It's a flow. Do you understand? It's a current that's flowing for their benefit. It's not for my benefit.
This term justice, because obviously most people equate justice with a sense of balance,
yes,
and a sense of equality.
That's
and
right.
Finding the truth.
Exactly.
Right, and you're saying it's not about this?
It's not about that. No, justice is not about that.
Oh,
yes.
At its root.
That's right. At its root, justice is about the flow of wealth, power, currency, value to suit you.
That makes a lot of sense to me in terms of thinking about the court system.
Exactly.
Yeah, it does, because I've observed how the courts
related to the banks, because the decisions that are made in the court, results in money.
Absolutely.
It goes back to the banks.
That's right.
So the banks and the courts are related.
And evidently the courts in this land and in other lands are inherently in one favour.
Exactly. They have one current, one flow, you see. And
so then,
as a court.
In that sense, basically, in the modernisation of the word justice, the population has been tricked.
Yes, that's right. So the people shouting for justice, they don't really understand what they're shouting for. So those who do understand what justice is, they're just laughing at you and not telling you.
Like the judge.
That's right.
Judge.
That's right.
Judge
That's right. So the judge will be laughing at, because he knows You can scream as much as you like, but
he's giving you justice.
Exactly, his justice.
Right.
Exactly. That's right. His juice.
You're in his juice.
In his
You're
juice.
in his
That's
flow,
right. That's right. In his soup.
With his banks.
It's right. With his banks.
You're working with his banks.
Exactly.
And he's working with his banks.
Of course.
Yeah. And
Of
they're
course.
banking it up so that the thing flows in a certain way.
That they want it to flow to nourish their crops, to nourish their business, to nourish their cultural values, to nourish their identity. See, that's all. So all of that is in the juice, is in the soup. Identity, self-worth, education, all of it is in the juice of the soup.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That's how I understand it. So that's how I address that. Replace racism with justice. Racism is justice, but it's not justice for us. It's justice. It's juice. It's soup for somebody else.
In your definition of racism, where does the issue of, and we talk about racism, because when people say racism now, most people think that racism is something all different people can do.
That's right.
Any culture can be racist to any other culture. People
Right.
can be racist to each other.
That's a confusion.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm clear that maybe it's better to qualify it and to talk about white racism, given that there is a root point when racism was institutionalized and then given a whole different kind of power from prejudice.
Right.
So that point where the white racism begins and institutional racism begins should be just labelled as white racism. Right,
which is white supremacy.
Okay, white supremacy, right. So with that now, if it be that, and that has some connection to melanin and the ones who seem to express this mentality of racism, or they try to manage the current of that.
Yes.
They seem to connect it to disaffect those of the most melanin.
Yes.
The more melanated you are,
yes.
the more disaffected you are supposed to be under the system of racism.
Right.
So, what's your thought on this? Because that conversation about racism and its connection to melanin and melanation doesn't seem to come into your definition. Yeah,
well, after the talk this evening at this place, I kind of had to rethink. Some new thoughts came to me this very evening.
Oh, great.
Because there was, in our discussion and question points, I was asking once the African people discover themselves and get back to know themselves, and then they got power, what are you going to do with the so-called people that have classified themselves as white, or who have the European value? What are you going to do with them? Now you got your power back. What would you do? You're saying they come from the Neanderthals and so on. So
did the brother say that?
That was a general conversation.
I didn't catch the beginning of
Oh,
this
right,
talk,
yeah.
so.
That was a general conversation between the speaker of the evening and the crowd. This general vibe.
Okay.
And the speaker of the evening was very good. He was saying we just need to, once we understand ourselves, I mean the African self, then you'll see we will all see the European or the racist as a child, and then they'll look. Those racists who are doing all these terrible things will look to us as parents, and then they'll start to behave themselves, so we can teach them, which is quite nice. Whilst I've heard from other people saying, listen, once we get our power back, we're just going to wipe them off the planet because they're evil, and they cannot be reformed. So it's nature, not nurture. So it's part of their nature to be like that. So there's no point talking to them.
It's a very deep thing you're saying there. What do you think?
I'm not sure. I'm trying to understand nature and nurture. See, if it's nature, then you can't really teach it. It's just nature. That's just the way they are. But if it's nurture, that means by conversation or observing something, observation, it can change behavior. So nurture allows a change of behavior. But if it's nature, that's the way they're built, there's no hope. There's no point talking. Then it destroys even the value of language, which I've experienced because when I've been sectioned as being mentally ill. So I'm telling you, I don't mind in the truth. Now that they had 4 people, 4 doctors, white doctors, and they were. As I was speaking to them, I thought that. Because the issue was racism, they sectioned me as having a delusional disorder, and the delusional disorder that I have is that I have a preoccupation with the subject of racism.
Wow.
So you got 4 white doctors, one black guy.
Sorry, one moment. Let me just get this clear. So you've been sectioned.
Yes,
because
you're talking to officially a mentally ill person.
By the definition of the ones who sectioned you.
That's right. Yes.
So you've been sectioned based on your apparent preoccupation with racism.
That's right, the subject of racism.
You are concerned with racism.
Yes, and that's a mental illness.
Are you concerned with racism?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But they said that I have a preoccupation. What's the language? That's right. That's right. What's the language? There's your preoccupation with the subject of racism. So 4 white people said that this one black guy has a problem. He's mentally ill because he has a preoccupation with the subject of racism.
Wow, that's deep.
And then during that interview process, it's not an interview. While they're assessing me in the mental health hospital, they said, you're getting a bit intimidating. So what I did, I said, I'm getting intimidating. Okay. So I picked up my chair and took the chair to the back of the room and sat down there. And said, you don't need to sit so far away. I said, well, listen, you feel that you're saying that I'm getting intimidating. I don't want to be sitting close to you. I want to sit right to the back of the room so you don't think that I'm trying to intimidate you. And I'm not trying to raise my voice or anything. So I'm trying to speak at a very low volume and sit on the chair right at the back of the room, as far away from you as possible, and we can continue our conversation like that, so that you don't feel intimidated. Because I don't know what I'm doing that makes you feel intimidated. I'm only presenting you the very information that the government has published in the Freedom of Information Act regarding protected characteristics.
Protected characteristics?
Yeah, have you heard of protected characteristics?
Let's define the term.
Right. Well, these are the government's terms of protected characteristics. The protected characteristics are, I think, gender, race, sexual. There's official set of protected characteristics. Okay. And race is one of them. And when you fill in the forms, when you're going to the hospital, there's a number of forms that deal with ethnicity. So there's race and there's ethnicity. So what I was presenting to the doctors, I was saying, look, I've got the race information here, which is British government, and I have the ethnicity information here, which they use in the census.
Right.
And you're using it as well in the NHS to define whether people are black, white, Asian, and so on. So this is race and ethnicity. And so I was presenting them that my state of mind is a result of this information. So it's not just my imagination. Here's the facts, and they started. As I started presenting facts, they started saying it's intimidating. So we can go further along that. I mean, it's up to you with the interview.
You
can go in. There's lots of interesting issues.
I must admit, we've entered a path which is I'd like to keep the current.
Exactly. I'd
like to keep
that's
the
right.
current.
The current.
It's a
Okay.
very
Yeah, that's
interesting
fine. Yeah, we can go
flow
along.
that
I can go anywhere.
In truth, when I first met you,
Yes.
I was curious about these cards that you have, which define these codes.
Yes.
It seems to me that you've made a point of carrying the police codes that they use to define people.
That's right. I'm doing research into that subject.
You've researched it. You've made some cards to share with people and
Yes.
inform them.
That's right.
And I guess this is why those agents of the health service would say you were occupied with it because you've gone so deeply into it.
Okay.
However, if you were in a university, I guess they'd call you a scholar on it.
Yes, possibly so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's how it seems to me. Because
Yes.
you're speaking clearly to me about it. And I mean, I'll let the listeners of You Learn Naturally Radio judge the clarity of what we're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what to say now? Because, one,
It's a dilemma.
It appears to me, well, the clarity of what you've said to me appears that you've been basically trapped into a system in terms of the mental health system.
Yes.
Based on your preoccupation with racism.
Yes.
And from what I can see, given that all of European systems have now come to a point where they've defined themselves as institutionally racist.
Yes.
The health sector, the police sector, the education sector, all of these sectors have publicly stated that.
Oh, careful. Are you sure that each sector has said that?
Yes, I am.
Because I know the police said that, but I don't think the NHS has said that.
They've acknowledged that they have institutional racism.
Oh, well, I'll check on that information because I suspect there's a trick there. I suspect that the police have admitted that there's institutional racism, but I'm not sure that all the other government bodies have said that.
Okay.
So
I hear you.
Very dangerous situation there. Very dangerous. Check that information. As far as I understand, it's only the police. And then people assume that it's other government bodies. So I could be wrong, but it's something worth checking. But most black people think that all the government is institutionally racist, and all the government and all the different departments of the government have accepted that they're institutionally racist. Most people have said that. But when I've actually asked them to produce the information and the evidence, they're only able to find where the police have admitted that they're institutionally racist, but no other department.
I hear you.
Yeah. So if you can make that clear.
It's interesting.
Yes.
But we are talking about the difference between what is common sense and what is acknowledged publicly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yes, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
mean,
That's right.
I think it's fair to say that there is the mass of the population
Yes.
would recognise that there is institutional racism throughout much of the structures. But that's something we have to research that. I think
Exactly, because it's
you're
very
right, you're
deadly.
right,
That's
you're
right.
That would have to be
Otherwise, you could
researched.
end up sectioned. See, that's how serious that very issue
Thank you for your
is.
warning.
Yes.
Thank you for your warning. And
Yes.
this is from one with experience of it.
Yes.
And I don't want any listeners of You Learn Naturally Radio to be sectioned.
Exactly.
No,
Exactly.
Not for having a preoccupation with racism.
Exactly.
However,
Yes.
obviously, it needs to be replaced.
What needs to be replaced?
The destructive effects of this thing called racism. It has a destructive effect, and so this thing needs to be replaced. And on the basis of that, let's take it to the one that's acknowledged it in the police service. In the police service, we can agree that they've acknowledged that they are institutionally racist.
Yes.
Right. And in doing that, they've declared that they want to replace it. They want to take it out of their system. They want to remove the racism from their system. That's what they've said, right? Is that fair enough? You've researched. You're a scholar for this, so I'll defer to your knowledge.
Okay. I've got some documents with me, and I'd like to read from them, because language and the use of words is extremely sensitive when it comes to the issue of racism. See, a lot of black people, they get emotional, but racism, as far as I understand, is like the core. It's like the sacred. It's a sacred. It's their juice. You can't mess around with their juice. Do you understand? We discuss it. You can't put emotion when you're dealing with that subject. It's too highly charged.
Okay, I hear you. You know what? That material that you have to get.
Yes.
We need. It's evident to me that we need to have a show, a conversation that is dedicated to the rest of this conversation.
Right.
Now we're at a point I can see that the space we're in needs
Yes.
to transition into nighttime closing and such things. So
Yes.
I'm going to leave everyone at that point.
Yes,
and
yeah,
we're going to have to continue this conversation.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes.
And yeah, thank you for that.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay. Great talking to you.
It's wonderful.
Great.
You are tuned in to You Learn Naturally Radio. You Learn Naturally Radio.
Wow!
YouLearnNaturally.org. YouLearnNaturally.org.